the flickering light of Asia, or the Assyrian nation and church. But what was once peculiar to the political relation of the two empires became inevitable also in the religious sentiments of their Christian subjects. Up to this time, the Eastern Church, although keeping her independence from the Mother Church, held a fraternal relation to the latter. The bond of Christian unity between the two countries was so manifest that it aroused even the suspicion of the Persian throne. But now a new phase took place in religious history, and the relation which was once so close and so affectionate between East and West, was broken, never to be repaired. Constantinople called for a new bishop. The choice fell upon Nestorius to fill the vacant see. Up to this time, nothing is known by the Church in general as to the peculiar doctrine with which the schools of each country were pregnant. But the election of an Eastern bishop brought at once into light the two opposite tendencies of theological training. The doctrinal controversy, of which we shall have occasion to speak later, broke the bond of unity and created the absolute independence of the Eastern Church. There occurred indeed many schisms within the Roman Empire itself, but the parties and splits created by such controversies had to yield to the despotism of the sovereign who upheld the state religion. It was not so in the East. Such a division would rather be favored by the Persian ruler, and the Christian teachers would have perfect liberty to propagate their own tenets in a land whose relation was intensely bitter to the neighboring country, where the ruling church was in power. When the so-called Nestorians were thus expelled from the Roman Empire, they found refuge and toleration in the Persian dominions. So the monarchs who were once persecuting their Christian subjects now began to protect and support them. During the Nestorian controversy, Edessa was the eastern seat of learning. This school stood as the glory of the Mesopotamian church. Here all the Persian clergy received their education under the most liberal teachers, and here were generated those doctrines which agitated and shook the Christian world. What Nestorius upheld in his field of controversy was it originated by him. He did not generate the doctrine which caused his excommunication, banishment, and oath. Long before Constantinople opened her gates, welcomed the eloquent monk of the East. The doctrine of the person of Christ had been defined by the great divines of Edessa. The controversy which he undertook became merely the means of uniting together as a distinct body all those who were imbibed with the doctrines represented on the platforms of the offended city. But the western metropolis was not the only theater of the doctrinal dispute. Immediately after the conclusion of the Robber Synod, the very city of Edessa itself became a field of the violent controversy between the two opposing parties. As Nestorius was not without supporters in the midst of his bitter foes, so Cyril had at least a few in the east to defend the Alexandrian theology. Rabulus, who was formerly in friendly terms with the Eastern theologians, had now attached himself to the Egyptian bishop. He was now occupying the spiritual see of Edessa, and created the bitterest antagonism against the ecclesiastics who supported the doctrines which Cyril rejected. Associating himself with a party of zealots, he tried all in his power to crush the growth of the new movement. His antagonism, however, was met with a determined resistance. The number of the two opponents which the school of Edessa had sent out was too great for his futile attempts. The clergy stood boldly him, while Abbas, a presbyter, who was presiding over the school of Edessa, made his name memorable in the annals of the Nestorian history by his fearless courage to condemn the Alexandrian heresy. Rabulus, learning of the strength of the new body, resorted to the tyrannical measures, but the banishment of the clergy who had attached themselves to the Alexandrian heresy put an end to the influence of the heretical leader. An Assyrian graduating class in theology, Prof. Baba seated in the corner. Prof. Baba was a noted orator.